running through everything you need to know about the marathon. There are many marathon events for you to choose from. In fact, most major cities will host at least one a year. The most famous events are probably the Boston Marathon and the London Marathon. The Boston Marathon is the world's oldest yearly marathon event, tracing its roots back to 1897. It's not an easy run to participate in, though, and beginners aren't allowed. The London Marathon is more welcoming for all and has many disabled participants. People also like to dress up in fun costumes to raise funds at this event. Speaking of fun marathons, there's an especially creative one in France. The Marathon du Médoc was created in 1985 as a silly twist on a marathon. Runners enjoy musical breaks with orchestras, drink wine, and even eat steak. But what if you're looking for a marathon a little closer to home? Well, you'll want to check out New Taipei City's 万金石 Marathon. This appealing marathon is held in March and runs along the North Coast, which means runners get amazing views. So, what are you waiting for? It's time to get training for a marathon.
Hi everyone, welcome to English for You. I'm Mike.
I'm Shiglin.
And we are back for day 3 of our marathon story about marathons. This is actually a long 3-day story. We don't normally do 3 days, but I guess since we're doing the longest running race that most people would ever do, it's good that we have a long article. So far we've learned about the history of marathons. We've learned about what you might do to get ready for a marathon. Today we're going to be learning about where to do a marathon because obviously running 42 kilometers through a city is not something most places will do every weekend. They got to shut down the city, shut down lots of roads, organize all these volunteers and runners. It's a big thing. So they kind of move them around the world. There are a few every year in certain places, and there are famous ones that, if you're a really serious runner, you would want to do these famous marathons. It's kind of like climbing Mount Everest in the Himalayas, and some people might want to climb Mont Blanc in France, the famous mountains for someone who's into mountain climbing. These are the ones you want to do. These are the ones people will be very impressed by. So as the article begins, we learn that there are many marathon events for you to choose from. In fact, most major cities will host at least one a year. Yes, we've talked about the Taipei Marathon. Is there one in Taichung or Kaohsiung? I'm not sure, but there are many around the world at different times. Of course, usually in the cooler weather, because that's what the runners like, but not at winter. You don't do it in the snow. So if you're really into it, you could probably have a really interesting world tour just running marathons in all the different cities.
所以有很多马拉松的赛事可以让你选择。那么事实上，其实大多数的主要城市每年都会至少举办一次马拉松。
All right, so there are lots around the world. There's one in Taipei. There's one all over the place. But there are some really, really famous ones. It says the most famous events are probably the Boston Marathon and the London Marathon. Those would be some big ones. There's the New York, that's pretty big. The Berlin Marathon. Chicago, I believe, has a good one. The Boston Marathon, I think this one might be tough because there's lots of hills.
Yeah,
that's a pretty tough one. And the London Marathon is a little bit more for fun.
Yeah.
London is not a hilly city. You'd get a great tour of the city. And also people in the London Marathon wear crazy costumes. Often they put on crazy costumes and run the marathon raising money for charity. But you'll see people dressed as Big Ben. You'll see a guy dressed as a waiter carrying a tray of wine glasses. They do kind of get into the sort of fun part of it. Whereas I think Boston is pretty serious. And some of them are actually, as we'll learn, hard to get into. So let's continue. It says the Boston Marathon is the world's oldest yearly marathon event. Interesting. Tracing its roots back to 1897. 27. When we trace, we're not talking about drawing something in the way that you trace something by just following the shape of it with your pencil. No, here we're talking about sort of following not on a paper or with a pencil, but following in time. If you're going back in time and finding the connections between things that happened at different times but have some relationship, you are tracing things, okay? So a lot of the problems, say, we're having in the world today, they didn't just happen yesterday or recently. Other things happened, then those other things made other things happen. So if we follow that line kind of back in time, then we are tracing things. We're sort of following it back to the beginning, back to the source, or back to the roots. For example, Connie can trace her family's history back to a small town in southern Italy. Maybe Connie lives in New York today, but her great-great-great-grandfather, came from this small town, and her family tree and family history has allowed her to trace that back to certain people she's never met.
所以呢 trace 就是有追查或回溯的意思，那么可以当名词哦，它名词就是有痕迹的踪迹或踪迹的意思，比如说没有留下任何痕迹，英文就可以说 to leave no trace of something， 比如说 when Lucas moved out, he left no trace of having been there， 所以没有人知道他住在那边过，所以波士顿马拉松是世界上最古老的年度马拉松赛事，那它的历史呢可以回追到1897年呢。
All right, so the Boston Marathon, very old, very famous, but not easy to actually get into these days. It says it's not an easy run to participate in, though, and beginners aren't allowed. As I said, I think there's lots of hills, so this is harder than most. Most marathons are fairly flat, but this one is really challenging. Boston's not a big city. Maybe they don't want the race to take so long. Anyways, beginners aren't allowed. So you'd probably have to show proof that you've done these other marathons in other places. You finished them in a reasonable time, like 3-4 hours. So you basically need to show that you have experience. And if it's your first marathon, if you're a beginner, they'd say, no, sorry, come back in a few years when you have a bit more experience. So that's a pretty serious one for the pretty serious runners. How about the London Marathon? Well, as you said, it's a bit more fun. It says the London Marathon is more welcoming for all and has many disabled participants. That's right. They have wheelchair sections and things like that. I'm not sure they would have that in all the other marathons. So it's more welcoming. It's kind of more open for all. As we said, people wear funny costumes. People who aren't in really good shape will do it. They might walk along of the way, that kind of thing. So it's much easier to get into. But we should point out a lot of these marathons are super popular. So you might have to kind of apply and they might have a lucky draw.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So even if you're ready to do it and, in good shape, they might say, sorry, we had 50,000 people who want to run, but we can only let 10,000 people run. We didn't pick your name or whatever.
Yeah.
So, you do have to be a bit patient to get into some of these famous marathons. And this one, it's also great because disabled people in wheelchairs, people on crutches, people whose bodies don't work in quite the way that most people do, who have special needs, they also are able to run, usually before or after the other runners go.
所以这个 disable 就是残障的意思，那我们就知道残疾这个字英文就是 disability， 所以伦敦马拉松对所有人来说就会比较亲民一点啦，而且还有很多的残疾人士参加。I think I'm quite interested in this one.
It does sound like fun. And even if you weren't running that hard, you're just it's kind of like a running party sort of thing. It says, as we mentioned, people also like to dress up in fun costumes to raise funds at this event.
You mentioned that.
Yeah, so you might get seen on TV if you're dressed, as a dinosaur running along or something. And often people do raise funds or raise money at this event for charity. You might say to your friends, hey, give me 100 NT for every kilometer that I run or something like that. And if you make it to the end, they'll have to give you 4,000 NT or something like that. And that money goes to, cancer charities or whatever is important to you. And you can dress up. When you dress up, you wear a costume, as people people do before Halloween.
所以呢，老师这边讲的 dress up 就是装扮，那 costume 就是你的服装，所以我们万圣节的服装叫做 Halloween costumes， 所以人们都很喜欢打扮啦，然后穿着很好玩的服装，在这次的活动中筹集资金。
All right, so speaking of fun marathons, because we were just speaking or talking about the London Marathon, here's another one. This sounds fun and also kind of crazy. Speaking of fun marathons, there's an especially creative one in France. Okay, so this is not the Paris Marathon, which I'm sure is great, and a lot of people love it, but it's just a normal running race. This one is more special, more creative. That means it's original, it's imaginative, it's something that you might not find in any other place in the world. It's so kind of unique and special and unusual. Here's a good word, here's a good example for creative. Salvador Dali is famous for his creative artworks, where other people paint trees and, handsome gentlemen or pretty ladies. He paints melting clocks and weird stuff like that.
所以 speaking of something or someone 就是提到，那这个 creative 就是有创意的意思，来自于动词 create， 所以创造力就是 creativity， 也可以指创意的意思。那么创造出来的东西就是 creation。那比如说 too many rules might deaden creativity， 或者是呢 imagination is the source of creation， 所以创意是很重要的。那我们还有另外一个是法国的马拉松，它非常的有创意哦。
All right, so what is this creative race or creative marathon in France? It says the Marathon du Médoc, or I guess that should be Le Marathon du Médoc, was created in 1985, okay, not too long ago, as a silly twist on a marathon. So that's what it's called, the Marathon du Médoc. This is a region in France. Runners enjoy musical breaks with orchestras, drink wine, and even eat steak. Okay, that is pretty unusual.
Yeah.
These are not things you will find at almost any other marathon in the world. They don't usually have musical breaks. All right, everyone, we're going to stop and listen to some Beethoven or something like that. We're going to have a glass of wine, and then I'm not sure this is a good idea. We're going to eat a big old steak. Here I am. I've been running for 20 kilometers. My stomach's empty. I'm exhausted. I want meat. I want red meat in my belly. I'm not sure that your stomach will be happy with you, but hey, I guess it's more interesting than, just a power bar or something like that. So this is definitely an original twist. A twist is something that's been added to something and it's surprising, it's original. Maybe it's something that happens in a story that makes you go, oh, no, I never guessed that was his sister or something like that. It's kind of a surprise thing that will definitely catch your attention because you think you know what you'll get, but haha, we surprise you at the very end with this little twist. And we have an example. There will be games at the Halloween party, but they will have a special spooky twist. So the normal kinds of games, but it'll be about ghosts and vampires and scary stuff.
所以 twist 就是有意外的转变或转折的意思，那它当动词也可以有扭转的意思，像我们对某人施加压力就可以说 to twist one's arm， 比如说 no one twisted my arm about coming to see you， 就是没有人逼我来看你啊，代表我自己想来的啦。And also we have musical,
That's right. We had those breaks. So you're going to stop when you're running. I guess this is if you want to. But you can stop and they'll have bands playing music. Why do I know that? Because it says a musical break with orchestras. Musical is anything about music, right? If you are a musical kind of person, you like to play music. You find it easy to, you have a special talent for music. If you go to see musicals, you like to see plays and performances with lots of singing and dancing in them. And if you want to have a musical education, well, maybe you want to be a professional musician, be a music teacher, be a pop star, singer, whatever it might be, but it has to do with music. For example, Steve bought his sister a musical birthday card that plays Happy Birthday when you open it.
That's cute.
Most birthday cards are not musical. This one plays music.
So musical 就是音乐的，很好记啊，它是来自于 music 这一个字嘛，所以乐器的英文是什么？就是 musical instruments。那么我们 musical 当名词也可以哦，就是指音乐剧的意思。那老师刚刚有提到音乐家就是 musician， 所以你可以讲 She has a very promising future as a musician.
And they also had the word wine. So people will stop for musical breaks and they will drink wine. So, well, if you're drinking, wine is some kind of liquid that people drink, right? Right. Wine is basically grapes that have been crushed and they've been left in barrels for a while to turn into something with alcohol. They have red wine, we have white wine, you have champagne, which is a kind of bubbly wine. When we think of France and Italy and now more and more Australia, California, Chile, these are some of the places where they make a lot of really, really good wine. But of course, France, and in fact, the Medoc region of France is also famous for wine, which may be why they have this marathon there. But it's an adult drink. You have to be over 18 because it has alcohol in it. But a lot of people enjoy a glass with their dinner or something like that. And wine can be anything from really cheap and not very good to crazy expensive and really, really old, but a lot of it comes from Europe. Here's an example. The Bordeaux region of southwestern France is where some of the best wines in the world come from.
所以呢 wine 就是葡萄酒，那红酒就是 red wine， 白酒是 white wine， 气泡酒呢就是 sparkling wine。 那么我们当动词也可以很酷，就是 to wine and dine someone， 就是你设酒宴呢去款待某一个人。比如说 Our host wined and dined us very well。 那老师刚刚讲 orchestra 这边指的是管弦乐团的意思。
All right, and we also have that orchestra. An orchestra is a group of people playing music, but using those older styles of instruments, violins, violas, cellos, trumpets, tubas, French horns, clarinets, bassoons, oboes. I could go on and on. But if you're listening to Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, Tchaikovsky, that kind of music, you're listening to an orchestra, not a rock and roll band. But, back in the article it says, but what if you're looking for a marathon a little closer to home? Yeah, we live in Taiwan, Boston, London, Medoc in France. These are pretty far away.
Yeah.
I can't take, a month off to go there and stuff. What if I want to do it around here?
对，所以这边我们看到 what if 的用法，我们赶快看一下今天的 language and focus。所以 what if 指的就是说呢，如果怎么样会怎么样呢？那或者是要是怎么样，你觉得如何呢？那一般陈述句的时候呢，我们会拿来表示寻求意见同意，或者是比较高的可能性。比如说 What if we move the sofa over here? Would that look better? 这个就是在寻求意见的感觉。但如果今天是假设语气，那就是有一点委婉啊，不确定，或者是基本上是没有可能，或可能性比较低。比如说 What if you had a time machine and could travel back into the past? 代表因为不太可能有时光机嘛，所以它就是一个假设。所以假设语气呢，如果用在过去没有发生的事情的时候，我们的动词时态就要使用过去完成式哦。比如说 What if you had been born into a very poor family? Would you have been the same person you are? 代表你并不是出生在贫穷人家，但是你只是在假设。
All right, so yeah, what if you want to do a marathon, but you don't have the time or money or whatever to go to a famous one around the world? Well, you can do one right here at home. It says, well, you'll want to check out New Taipei City's Wanjinshi Marathon. So there you go, another one in northern Taiwan, not the Taipei City Marathon. This is outside of the city. I've never heard of this one, but it sounds interesting.
所以呢，我们看到 check something out 就是瞧瞧，所以我可以说 Hey Mike, I wrote a new song, come check it out.
I'd like to check that out.
Yeah, 就是瞧瞧的意思。所以如果你住在台北，住在台湾，不想要跑那么远，你可以到新北市的万金石马拉松。
Wanjinshi, yeah. So what is this about? It says this appealing marathon is held in March and runs along the north coast, which means runners get amazing views. That sounds great. And a view is basically a really beautiful scene that you can see, usually of nature, usually from sort of a raised piece of land. So imagine you're on a mountain or a hill. As you look out, you see fields or the ocean spread out in front of you, like a postcard, like a beautiful picture from a movie or something like that. And you just stop and go, wow. And then you Instagram yourself there because, of course, you have to do that too. So anywhere you go, from the top of a tower, from the top of a mountain, overlooking an ocean or something like that, if it's really impressive and magnificent and sort of shows the earth or a part of the earth in its most beautiful, attractive way, then you're at definitely a place where there's a good view. Here's another example from Taiwan. There are some great views of the Pacific Ocean along the road between Hualien and Taidong.
Yeah, 所以 view 是风景的意思。当观点 点看法也可以。比如说 What makes all these people come to the club? In my view, is the herd instinct. 为什么那么多人都来呢？我看来是群体心态吧。这个 in my view 就是 in my opinion 的感觉。所以这个吸引人的马拉松呢，是在3月举行哦，它是沿着北海岸举行，所以你还是可以观看台湾漂亮的景色。
All right, so as we finish, we will leave you with this last thought. So what are you waiting for? It's time to get training for a marathon. Absolutely. Just let me go out and get a pair of shoes and a pair of socks and a good pair of shorts and a good shirt and all the other things I need. All right, our chat question. Which marathon, if you do one, which marathon would you most like to take part in or see? Why?
Of course, the one in France.
The one in France.
Yeah, that one. It's a musical one.
No,
you get to drink.
I just think running a long way while drinking wine and steak.
Why?
I'm just afraid of what would be going on at the finish line.
Too luxurious?
No, just not good for your...
Everybody passing out.
Yeah, throwing up or I don't know.
Just don't get drunk.
Okay, you do that one. You give me your report. I will go and watch or take part in the London Marathon.
Okay.
And then we'll see who had the better time.
Where you can dress up.
But I would definitely want to check that one out. I'm not sure I would run in it, but watching it and drinking wine and listening to music, yeah, not bad. What about you guys? Which marathon would you like to try? Or maybe you want to try the one close to home. Maybe you will try the one close to home. We wish you all the best. Take care, everyone. We'll see you back here soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Vocabulary Review.
Trace. My mother traced our family history back to Scotland, where my great-grandparents worked as farmers. Creative. Michelle is a brilliant artist who often paints things in a very creative style, which people love. Twist. The twist is that the real bad guy in the story has always been the neighbor. Musical. Gina showed great musical ability by learning to play the violin in less than a month. Wine. Annie started to feel a bit drunk after her 3rd glass of wine during dinner. View. I like window seats on planes because I like the view of clouds in the sky.
智慧小补帖
Disabled. Costume. Orchestra.